Hey, welcome all to another episode of Subscription Radio. I'm excited to have today's guest, Alex from Malamatinas Ventures. I want to make sure, did I get that right?
You got that right. Yeah.
My Latin? Okay, all right. We were just joking ahead of this I took Spanish for like 8 years, didn't take Latin. And so now it's biting me in the ass. So, Alex, I want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your fund. I think let's start there.
Great. Well, great to be on the show and appreciate you taking the time. So I manage a fund called Melitas Ventures. We're New York based. We invest in better for you food and beverage companies. We invest throughout the entire value chain, but better for you branded products is really our core expertise. We invest early stage, seed series A, and have been fortunate to work with some great brands like Magic Spoon, MUD WTR, Verb Energy being some examples. We have a great team of investors, operators, digital marketing expert, gut health expert, and so we really look to partner with our companies and help them scale.
Got it. That's helpful context. And I think, part of the reason I was excited to get you on the cast was I wanted to talk about specifically around like the customer experience and how that ties into even, I guess, two things. One of which is, how does the customer experience tie into how you look and work with brands as an investor? But also I want to hear a little bit about your own experience as a consumer. Because I assume, do you have subscriptions? Do you have any favorite subscriptions? Like, what's your most recent subscription?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to answer that.
Are they all
question
portfolio
last,
companies?
I do have subscriptions with several of our portfolio companies.
Yeah.
So as you point out, I mean, the customer experience is key, right? I mean, Jeff Bezos has famously been talking about this for 20 plus years. And so, for the companies that we invest in, of course, the product itself is critical. The ingredient profile, the taste, the branding is also very important, and that needs to be something that resonates with customers and specifically, certain demographics that the brand might be targeting. The customer experience is everything from, when you first discover that brand on their website or on social media, clicking through and then, ordering the product for the first time to, it being delivered on your doorstep, perhaps getting text messages, email updates before and after. And, some brands do this very well, others not so well. And, an example of a brand I think that does it extremely well is OLIPOP. It's very cool brand that resonates with customers. It's a great tasting product. It's functional. And, after you get the product in this beautiful box with great messaging, and then post purchase, you get several emails that follow up with you, and they do it in a way where it's non-intrusive, or it feels non-intrusive, and your connection to the brand just grows over time, and it's educational, it's fun, and they really sort of vary the tone of the messaging. So that's very important. Other brands like MUD WTR, for instance, which is a plant-based coffee alternative company that we're invested in, provides a lot of content on their website, and it's a new category. They're a leader in the space, and so consumers really look to them not just for the product, but to learn more about the space, to learn about the ingredient profile. And these are all sort of factors that are part of the customer experience. So, myself specifically, I mean, I subscribe to both MUD WTR and OLIPOP, as well as Verb Energy, another one of our portfolio companies. And, again, I love the products, but I'm always excited when I receive that package at the door. And, another example with regards to, let's say, Verb Energy is, they text message you, and that's pretty innovative. I mean, now more brands are using that approach, but what's really cool about that is that it's quite personalized. So we all get inundated with emails, apps, but text messaging is typically reserved for your close friends, your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your mother, your father, and now some of these brands. So when I get a text message from Verb, it's like receiving a text message from a friend. It's exciting, and the tone is very important, right? So they're offering sort of new products. They're giving you a sneak preview of what's to come. So yeah, these are some examples.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been a subscriber to Verb for probably like 2.5, 3 years now. And I mean, I think the OG within at least the SMS space was always Dirty Lemon, right? So I think they were ahead of their time. That was one of the first examples I saw where I was like, oh, this is the actual customer experience actually wasn't great because you were forced to buy with your SMS. Like you couldn't actually buy from the web. But once you got hooked into the SMS experience, it was really interesting. And I think, I had listened to a recent interview actually with you when I was just trying to get familiarize myself a little bit more around your philosophy and like how you think about products and like your interest in the ones you've invested in. And I know one thing you mentioned was how Verb built the SMS technology themselves in-house. And I think one thing I'd be curious about is how, like when you look at these different brands like Verb or I'll say Mudwater. I'm friends with Paul, so Paul and I've had long conversations over the last like several years around just their own challenges around customer experience. A lot of it coming down to tooling, right? And so it's interesting talking about contrasting Verb, who's built, I would say, like the SMS part in house. And then a lot of the conversations that Paul and I have are around like when does it make sense to build in house versus to use external tools. I don't know. I'm curious, how has that worked out in your experience, just with the different brands in your portfolio? And like, have you come to a sort of cardinal rule yourself around like when does it work, when does it not, and like maybe just like what the pros and cons are of that?
Yeah, it's a good question, and this might be a little bit of a controversial statement, but one cardinal rule these days is not to have a cardinal rule because things are changing so quickly, and what works for one brand doesn't work for another, right? And the old school approach of marketing distribution has been disrupted. And so, some of these brands that are doing a really good job, like Mudwater, like Verb, are taking a unique approach, right? And sometimes there's overlap, but, each of these brands are also, to an extent, doing things differently. So, generally speaking, as most of these brands are outsourcing everything from sort of production to some of the technology, text messaging, et cetera. And, let's say in the case of Mudwater, it's working extremely well. Mudwater, really owns the connection with its customer, driving content, and being a leader in that space. Verb Energy also, very innovative in terms of, the product format, the ingredient profile. In their case, the fact that they've developed the text messaging platform, it works very much in their favor. And I think that resonates with customers in terms of the responsiveness and their ability to, combine sort of humans messaging with the AI. And it works in a fairly seamless way. And so for them, it's really very much integral to their business. For other brands, not so much, and so sort of outsourcing the text messaging makes more sense.
Well, I guess, and I'm curious, like, so I'll give you like so a lot of people who listen to our podcast, I would say, are in like the positions of like VP of growth, founder, CEO. Generally speaking, they're on the probably growing really fast. they are past that initial product market fit. They're at the point though of sort of, I think the build it versus buy it. And there's a lot of, we don't have to get into like headless, because there's just so much stuff going on right now, right? Where there's, we'll call it, there's the outer edges of the frontier of, do you rebuild everything and make sure that you have full control over everything versus tap into to the tools. But I am curious around like with like as a technologist, my inclination or my concern is when you take responsibility over building the tech yourself, that potentially becomes a liability. It's not like technology is valuable up until the point in which enables you to provide a better customer experience and to run your business better, right? And so if the tools that are available aren't enabling you to do those things, then that's a really compelling reason to build your own, right? Like if you're trying to create a customer experience that you just cannot build or cannot accomplish out of the box, then you're hurting your business. The flip side is my assumption is that if the eventual goal for most brands is either acquisition and maybe you can speak more to this around like what's your perception of or what's your belief around like the end goal of the brands that you invest in. But if the end goal is presumably to IPO, to be acquired, to have like private equity or whomever get involved, my assumption is having your own tech is a liability. Right? Like if you're a firm acquiring or managing a bunch of specific CPG brands, you're like, all right, they're all on Shopify. So we generally speaking don't have to do a whole lot of technical due diligence. We understand more or less that the technology will continue to be maintained versus building an entirely different like custom platform. Now there's of course like a spectrum there. It's not one or the other, but that's something I've been thinking about a lot and speaking with like my friends who run D2C CPG brands specifically, is just talking through like, you know, if they build something, is it actually creating value to the business, or at what point does it become an actual liability and they should be focusing their money and resources on not owning that part of the tech stack?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So, you know, in the case of, let's say, Verb Energy, they built the technology, the text messaging platform, because it didn't really exist. At least, you know, it wasn't widely available. So, you know, many of these companies, again, are true innovators, right? So they saw the potential, they built it. They also happen to have, you know, a co-founder who has a very relevant background, right, as a CTO. So the technology itself is impressive. They continue to iterate and to improve it. And so I think they have a very strong handle on that. As far as, you know, what the goal is of these companies, of course, I'm generalizing. You know, each of these companies have a very strong mission. I mean, at the end of the day, they are offering products to consumers that are better for you, that use healthy ingredients, you know, transparent labels, and you know, offering some good to people's lives, and you know, in some ways helping reduce obesity, diabetes. So very important missions. And then they're also, you know, when we're investors, they're looking to build rapidly growing businesses that can be profitable over time. And because the world is changing at such a rapid pace and digital marketing is evolving so quickly, you know, they're using different tools to figure out how to acquire customers at an affordable price and how to, you know, extend sort of lifetime value of these customers. So I'd say, you know, those are probably the key goals. And then, you know, for some brands, it might be, you know, an IPO, like a Beyond, for instance. Others, for many others, and the successful ones in the space, they're being actively acquired by large food and beverage companies because, you know, those companies are looking to diversify towards healthier, better for you products. So it really will depend, obviously, on the company and of, you know, the aspirations of the founders and the investors at that given point in time.
Got it.
And I guess more specifically, like you were asking about the technology, which is a good one, right? So for most sort of CPG businesses, again, I'm simplifying, but there will be certain sales, and then you'll put a multiple on that, and typically that multiple will depend on what the market multiple is for these kinds of businesses, obviously depending on how rapidly growing they are. I think if you have another element to this, so let's say technology, and you own sort of a text messaging platform that could potentially be licensed out to other companies, and there's some true IP there, then that increases the valuation of the business.
Got it. I mean, that's interesting because I was saying that more in, it's something I've been talking with and I'm thinking a lot about, but I haven't actually had the perspective of an investor around to what extent is that an asset versus potentially a distraction or a liability. Because I'd say as a software person, everything sounds simple to build. The pain is in the maintenance, and the pain is in especially around commodification, right? Like, so Klaviyo, I think, is a perfect example, which is, do you want to build your own Klaviyo so you have full control over email? And also that's a mature industry now too, right? So Klaviyo is doing email, SMS, but then you have like a whole gamut of alternatives that probably one of those alternatives fits the use cases or the needs of the business. And so owning that aspect or that sliver of the customer experience might not be so valuable. Yeah, because I guess now, at least for an SMS, the question would really be, do you use something like PostScript or do you build your own SMS product? Now, I would still say a lot of the SMS products are fairly, they're in their infancy around how customizable they are, even from a brand's perspective. As someone who's tried to help brands integrate, even attentive in PostScript, it's like you can go up to a certain point and then it's like you don't actually have full access to personalize it. So that's interesting. So I guess your point around when technology is an asset really comes down to the perception of, could it be spun out into a separate business potentially? And I was more focused on will it help you grow the business faster, or is it a distraction?
So there's obviously different approaches depending on the business, right? One business might want to spin it out. Another business might want to keep it integrated for the life of the company. It depends on the company we're talking about. I think what's critical, though, is that you have the skill set. And if you're looking to build out the technology, you need the skill set internally. As you point out, it takes a lot of work. And so, in the example I was giving with Verb, they've now got an engineering team that's focused on this, right? And they have a CTO who's very adept in the space. But if you don't have that expertise internally, of course, it makes sense to outsource it.
I am curious, like, so with a lot of the companies that you're talking to, because I know you invested at both the seed as well as like the Series A. Like, what's the typical makeup of those companies in terms of, like, I hate to use the term org chart, but is it marketing and brand focused and like one engineer? At least the brands that I've worked with, oftentimes they've worked with contractors or a third party agency. Whether that's they'll work with like a Red Antler on branding, and then they'll have like an agency who's built out a lot of like their custom Shopify or even like custom built stuff. And then maybe they'll have like one in-house junior developer. I'm curious, like in your experience, are there any patterns that you've seen there, or things, or even things that you look for, which is like if there's not a strong technical co-founder, then maybe that's a red flag.
Yeah. So, I think taking a step back, I mean, as you point out, we invest early and seed Series A. Some of this is semantics, but, typically seed is when we come in. And, we look for, unique products. And so we're very focused on certain structural trends where we believe we're early in that structural trend. And this company has a product that consumers can taste. There is initial product market fit. There is initial revenue traction. In terms of patterns on the team, I mean, there's a founder, right?
Right.
There's always a founder or a co-founder. I mean, that's really the most important person, right? Because these companies are so early on. And as we've been discussing, so much is outsourced, right?
Yeah.
So in some cases, they have a couple marketing people, but in other cases, it's maybe the co-founder, like Gabby from Magic Spoon. At first it was really him overseeing the marketing, and obviously now they've built out a big team. So it really depends. What I will say is that what's important for us is to see that the team, the co-founder, has the abilities to execute, at least initially, on the type of business that it is. So if it is, as we were talking about, if there is, let's say, a text messaging platform internally, you want to make sure you have a strong CTO overseeing that. If it's a beverage business, like, let's say, OLIPOP or Lemon Perfect, where in the early days there wasn't as much of an e-commerce business, then you want to make sure you have a founder and or sales team or salesperson that really understands the wholesale part of the business. So, and then ultimately we want to see that, the founders recognize what they are missing and what their skill sets are and what they need to build out. And that introspection, I think, is critical.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm curious, with the brands that you're seeing, and this can be as a consumer or an investor, how has the subscription model evolved or is evolving? And are there any specific areas where you're like, man, why the hell are people doing it this way instead of this way? Or, this is such an awesome opportunity. Because I think the thing we talk about now these days is you have you get the same product every month, or even you can rate, we'll call it the a la carte. Where you buy the product, you get it delivered on auto ship every X number of days. You have the ability potentially to switch. But what we're also seeing is more around membership models where there's some sort of a benefit layer on top of, or even in replacement of the auto shipment of more product. What do you when you look at the subscription model? And look at the future of it and what you like or don't like. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think what we're experiencing these days is so many brands out there, and the engagement is over email, over social media, and so we're being inundated with messaging from existing and potentially new brands, right? And I think for many of us, we have probably several subscriptions going on at once. And I think depending on the person, you have limited bandwidth, right? There's only so many subscriptions that you want to pay for, that you want to keep track of. And so, there's sort of, a commitment fear, I guess, with different thresholds for consumers. When you're finding a new brand, do you really want another subscription that you're paying for monthly that you have to keep track of? So with that in mind, I think, the brands that are doing this very well are introducing an element of flexibility in that subscription. And again, to use the Verb Energy as an example. So, you subscribe, you will get your monthly orders of, Verb bars. But they will text you every month before you're about to get that new order, and they'll ask you, do you want, the 2 pouches? Do you want to add anything, or do you want to skip this month? And that's a really useful tool. So I was, traveling in Europe for the past couple of weeks, and I got a text message, so it didn't make sense to have more of our Verb bar delivers. It was very easy for me to respond, say, please skip. That's taken care of. And then the next month, I'll order as per normal. So I think that flexibility is really important.
Got it. Yeah, and I mean, and that goes back to messaging and customer experience, right?
100%.
Got it. Oh, I mean, so anything else that comes to mind for you, like when we talk about subscriptions and, um, or any questions that, you basically, you have a tech nerd over here who I think I subscribe to everything under the moon. I'll say that I'm not in the camp of, like, I've done intermittent fasting for the last 10 years, so I'm not a breakfast person, so I'm not but I'm a health person in the sense of, like, I'm trying to stay alive. I guess, is there any way, or maybe another way for me to phrase this is, like, do you have any big asks yourself, right, to the internet or to me around, like, is there any individual thing that if it could come into your life professionally or business wise that would open up a huge amount of doors, or anything that you want to understand or learn that maybe we can help you with?
I appreciate that. I think, Facebook and Instagram helped give rise to this direct to consumer boom, if you can call it that, right? Which really accelerated during COVID, with many of us spending a lot of time at home. And so, a phenomenon that virtually all brands are experiencing now is that customer acquisition costs have risen so much on Facebook and Instagram, and they're trying to find other platforms to acquire customers. So, there's TikTok, and, there's obviously podcasts, and there's other ways of acquiring customers. But I think, finding more of these platforms, or sort of a Facebook alternative or something complementary to Facebook, I think would be very helpful for these direct to consumer brands.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I assume at this point you probably come across like co-op, right? Probably impossible to ignore. Is that in your mind like the type of is that like a compelling offering?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know the company very well. I'm definitely aware of them, and several of our brands use them. I've seen them, as a consumer on sort of the checkout experience, and it's pretty cool, right? Because you come across like-minded products, and I've definitely clicked on a couple of them and become a subscriber. So that's definitely an example of an innovative approach in terms of acquiring customers.
Got it. Yeah, I'll tell you another one that I know, like Good Morning America has actually been doing an interesting thing where they have like this GMA today where they basically spin up like a Shopify Plus store, and they'll do these promotions on air, and then basically for the course of like 24 to 48 hours they'll direct traffic to a brand. I mean, I can leave it to the rest of the internet to hopefully be able to maybe make some suggestions, or or hopefully maybe open any doors that might not have otherwise have come on your plate. But what's the best way for people to get in touch with you and to learn more about you and the firm?
Yeah, so our website is melitasventures.com, and you can reach out to us on info@melitasventures.com if you have a brand or a company that you're building in the space, or if you have any questions for us, and we'd be happy to respond.
Cool. All right. So if anyone has any suggestions around customer acquisition channels that are a lot less expensive and more effective than Facebook and TikTok, just send them there. We'll start having we'll call it like send the wish list. Be like, here are all the places to go. Well, awesome, man. Any last things you want to talk about, or parting words before we end this episode?
No, I really appreciate your time. It was a lot of fun talking with you, and look forward to doing this again soon.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.